Oh, I am now live. Add a guest. All right, guys, I've gotten a lot of comments about how I was staring at the camera like a 90-year-old man the last time trying to invite Tim. So I'm trying not to do that this time. We're getting started. We're here again. We're live. We're doing it. Let me see if I can invite Timothy to join us. Doop doo. Hope you guys had a good week. Tim joined. There he is. Hey, buddy.
There we go.
Now, when you join, do you... Oh, wait. This is me waving to you. Am I waving at you?
Yeah,
Hi.
that was fun. That was.
That says you waved at Tim. All right. So, Tim.
Okay.
Welcome back, buddy.
Yeah, I'm trying this on my phone this time to see if this changes how I feel about some things. But that looks better.
Well, I don't know if anyone's going to join us because my week was insane, and I haven't posted a single thing on Instagram. Oh, we do have some people.
Yeah.
Oh, I see you. What's up, Robinson Forged Metals? Well, I haven't posted anything this week, so it's just been nuts, man.
Yeah.
And I genuinely didn't even realize that today was Thursday until 7 minutes ago I was like, oh.
I'm like, I haven't sat still in days. Like, we went away from it, and then like Tuesday before I could finally get to the grocery store, and like Carissa got her first vaccine shot, so we had to go do that on Monday, and then finally got the groceries, and then all sorts of stuff. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. I really don't. I feel now. I said earlier, I was like, I miss maternity leave. I want to go back to that. Like,
dude, I didn't get that. Well, I left Ford's right before we had the baby, and the job I went to after that, I only got 2 weeks.
Right.
Yeah. And when I was at Ford's, I would have gotten 4 weeks. They changed it when you got your paternity leave.
Yeah, I ended up with.
But dude, that's insane.
Because of the way the holidays fell and the way she was born, so it was pretty.
That's all right, man. I stayed employed. Not that you didn't, but I wouldn't have had I stayed. All right. So first of all, quick shout out to my boy Jesse, Robinson Forged Metals. If you are looking for an epic blacksmith for some smithery or some smithing, as they say, that is your boy. He does some killer stuff. He's probably super busy. He probably doesn't want your work. But just in case he does, he's the guy to go to. And that's what happens. When you join the live show, I will plug your stuff. Even when you don't ask me to. In all seriousness, Jesse's a really good friend of mine, but he is legit talented. Like, for real talented. Check out his Instagram, rforgedmetals, and you can see for yourselves, guys.
Cool.
All right, so plugs aside, it's time to get started.
Yeah.
We watched. So this week we're gonna try to treat this one more like a rewind and talk about a few of the things that we watched this week. But there's some stuff we're a little bit excited about.
Yeah.
I think we're a hard hour limit on Instagram Live. I'm not sure. So we're gonna get started. Whatever we get to, we get to, and we'll just see how the conversation goes. Guys, if you have questions, anything you want us to touch on as we're talking through things, general questions, whatever, there is a little bubble, like a little speech bubble right around her, and it's got a question mark in it. You can plug your question in there because that'll actually like signal us that we have questions pending, and then we can get to them at our leisure. Or you can put it as a comment. But that thing is like scrolling, and I kind of block it out a little bit as best I can because it is uber distracting. Like, I don't know. We just talked about me staring blankly into the camera while trying to invite Tim. I am 1,000 years old when it comes to Instagram. So, anyway, let's see. Let's get started, man. So the first thing on my list, just because I'm pretty fired up about this doc. I think it's a blast. I think it's so much fun to watch.
Yeah,
And I did post about it on Instagram a couple weeks ago when I watched it, but it is the Netflix documentary The Last Blockbuster.
which is ironic
And
because
dude, that's the best part. And I think I said that when I posted. I was like, reason number one, it's awesome. There's nothing better than watching a documentary about the rise and fall of Blockbuster on Netflix.
but they kind of point that out at one point. You know, they go into that whole Netflix versus Blockbuster thing, and I think somebody even mentions the irony that it's on Netflix. And at that point, I sort of felt a little. I was like, I don't know, I felt some sort of way about it. Not guilty, but you're just like, ooh, I'm contributing to the problem.
Now, but to be fair,
Yes.
and Agrippina, we use the comments too. Don't worry. So to be fair, in the documentary, the CFO of Blockbuster, the former CFO of Blockbuster, outright was like, Netflix is not what killed us.
Yeah.
And it was, and then that's part of what's fascinating. You're going to learn what I loved about it, right? And, well, you know what? Let's talk about what is this movie about?
Yeah.
It definitely follows the last Blockbuster, what will eventually, through the course of the documentary, become the last Blockbuster. That's not a spoiler alert. If you don't know that there's one, if not zero Blockbusters left, then where you been?
I feel like it's up in the news somewhere, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
you're scrolling through and it's like a sub headline on CNN or Facebook or something. There's always some, the last Blockbuster. Yeah, I mean, it's not a surprise. And they were trying to build that little anticipation up, and I was like, I would have heard if this thing closed, right? Like, it's just there wasn't any major surprise.
I feel like that's gonna be, yes, that'll be at least news for a day,
Yeah.
right? Like Blockbuster's officially done.
Yeah.
I always thought I had a feeling that I knew there was one left. I thought it was the one in Alaska.
Me too.
I didn't realize that it was the store in Bend, Oregon has outlasted. And I've been to Bend, Oregon, which is bananagrams. So the movie not loosely, but it follows this when it starts. I think this movie is filmed probably starting in like 2015 or 2017. At the time, there's like 12 blockbusters left. And in the course of filming and follow-up sessions, whatever, as they've completed this documentary, it gets down to where the store in Bend is the final one left standing, and remains, I believe, to this day.
Yep.
So it does follow that. In the course of doing that, you get a lot of the history of Blockbuster, and you get how things happened the way they did, how they got started, how movie rentals started, which is what really got me. Like, that's what super grabbed me from the jump. Was because that's what I love. That's what I went back to school to learn about, film industry and how these things work and how this stuff happens. These are the conversations I love having. So that part for me is really what I loved. Also, just the history of movie rentals, the history of licensing, and how it was that Blockbuster ended up in the state that it did. Right. And as I said, the CFO does tell you it wasn't really Netflix, but some horrible, horrible business decisions leading up to the launch of Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, it even says that they were actually just as well positioned as Netflix at the time, right? When they turned down a deal with Netflix, they turned down the deal to buy Netflix, and they were prepared to, kind of go at their own, and they were better positioned because Netflix was, doing the mail-in thing, fledgling on demand, and Blockbuster was already set up, but they just got hammered. And then 2008 happened, and that just kind of contributed to everything. Hey, Cal, what's up?
Can you imagine if... I think about this all the time. So one of my favorite parts, I remember hearing that story about how Blockbuster had the chance to buy Netflix for $50 million and didn't. And I think about, like, the world. Blockbuster would still be a massive king in... Now, I don't think stores would have necessarily lasted or any of that, or the mail stuff. I mean, Netflix is videos by mail has. Do they even still do it? I'm gonna check my Netflix subscription. I feel like that might be a thing I turn on for like 7 minutes just to get a DVD in the mail again.
Part of me feels like it does because I heard something. I feel like I heard somebody say something like, "Oh, yeah, I can only get that if they send me the DVDs or something." Like
That's wild. That can't still be a thing.
but yeah, I don't know. But I mean, everybody has. I'm sure you have, and I even have one or two that were never mailed back. So
I have. So what I do have, I have one where I requested something. It's not even a movie I like. I can't even remember what it is. But it came. It says it was delivered and it wasn't. And do you remember how like if it wouldn't show up, you literally just went and clicked didn't arrive, and they would just immediately send you another one.
right.
And I think when the second one came, they both came the same day.
Of course.
And so then I sent one back and kept the other, and they never asked me about it. And to this day, I don't know why. I think it was, you know what it was? I think it was 300 Rise of an Empire.
Nice. Well, to be
I
fair,
have seen it once and never again. And I wish I'd sent them both back.
to be fair, one of the comedians in the documentary says he went to like the Blockbuster in his neighborhood that was closing, rented a ton of GameCube games that dates when this happened, and just didn't return them. He was like, "They're going out of business. What are they going to do? They have to chase me down for like 15 GameCube games." So.
Dude, that is, I mean, I don't know. They might have, but no, that's kind of genius.
Yeah.
So what stood out to you about this? So while you get the history and you follow the happenings of the store in Bend, Oregon, there's comedians, directors. Kevin Smith is in it. Ron Funches, Doug Benson. There's a lot of names that you know. Who?
Jamie Kennedy.
Yes. Oh, Jamie Kennedy. God, that dude is just hungry for work.
Got his start doing promo for Blockbuster. He was like part of the Blockbuster hype crew or whatever. That's how he got started in Hollywood, apparently.
For the commercials, I know. Which, another thing that Blockbuster did horribly wrong. I can't stand Jamie Kennedy. Anyway, so you get these guys coming in and essentially reminiscing, getting just nostalgic about Blockbuster, what it meant to them. But more than that, and again, what I really took from it was people in the industry like really talking about what movies mean to them. And that part of this doc is what really spoke to me, drew me in, and kept me fully engaged the whole time. Was that the same for you, Tim, or were you more actually reminiscing, nostalgic for Blockbuster itself?
I definitely got the like nostalgia. Like I could feel it. Like like they're talking about the smell of a Blockbuster. Like yeah, I could smell it, and like it would get me nostalgic for that experience, but not to the point where I'm like, I gotta drive to Bend, Oregon, like some people, and I don't need to experience it. So like I nostalgic in a that part of my life is over sort of way, like college sort of thing. Like you get nostalgic for the good times you had, but
ooh, that's good.
You really need to do that again, right? And I think what you were hitting on earlier when we were talking is you kind of forget all the bad about it, right? You're just like, oh yeah, I want to go back and I want to do all of that, and then you're like, well, what about when they didn't have your movie? Or what about when you forgot to return everything and you got to, like the good stuff, right? For me, what this really started was talking about the experience of movie stores in general, right? Movie video rental. Because before we ever had a Blockbuster, we had the mom and pop stores. So like we went to a place called Movie King for the longest time before we ever had a Blockbuster. And that started conversations between, Carissa and I. And it was, those mom and pop stores, they had the adult room in the back. And they talk about that in the documentary. So, right? So we started talking about that and our experiences with the back room. And then when the first time we went in the back room and how when you go in the back room, they might have, Back Alley Bangers 5, but not 1 4. And should I get 5 if I've never seen the other 4? Just all of that fun stuff. I mean, Carissa's telling me that, like, the first time she realized that there was a room back there, she was
Sorry, wait, I just can't get past like, oh, what if the story doesn't make any sense? If we haven't seen the prequels.
But like
so stupid.
we gotta catch up. Where are the rest of them? But no, like I distinctly remember like going into the Movie King and my dad being like, all right, hang out in the Disney section, I'll be right back. And like, where are you going? And not until I was in college when I finally went into the back room, I was like, nasty, man, come on. But like,
I don't understand that at all. Okay, so my renting experience was very different. So the first time I really remember renting movies, we grew up, we didn't have a lot, and my mom did like a ton with the little bit that we had. And one of the big things we did was movies. We loved watching movies. So there's a guy who talks in the documentary about being a latchkey kid. I was a latchkey kid.
Yeah.
And how that really shaped him and his love of movies and his career path, which is, I feel like that's my story, right? Chasing this dream, and with this podcast, my obsession with movies is born of the fact that I'd get home from school, no parents there, my babysitter was television. My mom would get home. Our favorite thing to do is like, we'd bust ass, like working, cleaning the house, doing whatever on the weekends and the evenings, so that we could sit down on Sundays, like UPN 20, DCA 20, all the versions that they were in the course of this span of time. They would do Sundays all day, starting at like 10 a.m. until, the 10 p.m., late movie would be runs of, like televised premieres of big movies that were in like their sixth run, right? And that was our all-time favorite thing to do. So when we didn't have a ton, the one thing we'd do is go rent movies.
Yeah.
And the one store we had here was a Blockbuster. And we had a second store that was like almost right next door. And I don't remember, we didn't go there a lot. It was like Movie Time, movie something, whatever. I remember it was red, right? Like that store was red and then Blockbuster was blue and gold. So, but none of them had that room. And I was raised by a single mom until I was a teen. My mom wasn't going back in the room with us there. She might have been going on her own. But like, I guess what I'm getting at is, what parent goes to take their kids to rent movies and is like, I can't stand it. I gotta go into the crankshaft room and go pick out whatever while my children, unsupervised, walk through this store? Like, right. That's bananagrams to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
I'm not judging anyone for going in the room. I'm judging people for going with their kids.
They point that out, right? For like, it was mainly suburban dads, right? Who came in like, where are the cheerleader movies? Like,
so grody.
But, Carissa's experience with it, like, she was like 11. She said she's looking. She's like, "What's behind this curtain?" And like this guy is like watching her, and then apparently her dad comes up and grabs her, and he's like, "Oh no, we don't go in there." And she's like, "Why?" And the best he could come up with was like, "That's where you buy movies." And she's like, "But why can't we buy movies?" Like, so it's just
because Daddy's already bought too many movies this week.
But like, so that's what the documentary was for me, like that.
Yeah.
And then you started talking about your other movie places, right? We had Movie King, and then Blockbuster, and then there was Movie Gallery is what I had in college. And weirdly enough, there were two movie galleries, one in each shopping center, like half a mile away from each other. It's like,
yeah,
two. I don't really, but that's what it got me thinking about, right? And we'd go in, you look for a movie. How many movies did I was trying to think of the movies that I found by going to Blockbuster. We used to do something similar. Like, I feel like during the summers we would rent a lot of movies, right? Because we had extra time. You didn't have to go to bed early. So, we'd rent a bunch of movies, 3 or 4 at a time. And we went on kicks, right? So, like, we got into, we went on a Will Smith kick. That's how I found Bad Boys. And then from there, it's like, oh, Martin Lawrence is funny. So then we found, Blue Streak and what's the one, Black Knight or whatever, the one he did where back in time. And so, like, we found, like, you went like that, right? It's like when you find an artist and then you find all of the other projects that are related to them. But that also that desperation, right? Like, oh crap, they don't have the new the Blockbuster that just came out at Blockbuster. So then you got to find something else because you don't want to walk out empty-handed, right? You got to rent something.
Yeah.
But that's what it got me talking about, was just that experience. And then that evolved from there. Like, then I was like, oh, you remember when there were stores in the mall where you would buy stuff? What was the one I was talking? Suncoast Movie Company.
Dude, I used to work at a Suncoast.
Right. So that's what I got excited about. Not necessarily Blockbuster. Again, I'm not going to go out of my way to go to a Blockbuster because been there, done that. But it was just that experience of going to any movie rental store. I mean, how many times did you walk down the horror aisle as a kid, right? And see all the strange like covers on stuff. I remember, I think Jack Frost maybe had...
Dude, Jack Frost used to mess with me.
A holographic cover or something.
Yes, of the demonic snowman.
Yeah. And then like the anime movies that had a little sticker in it that was like a little sad face and said like not for kids or adults only or something like that. And I was like, I don't understand.
I remember that
stuff. Like, there was just, that experience is scrolling through Netflix is not the same, right? Because it's not a visceral thing to it, right? This is real. Like, I can pick it up, I can read the back. If the cover doesn't look interesting here, I'm not going to read about it, right? On Netflix, I'll scroll right past it. But when you're in the store, when you're killing time, waiting for your mom to check out or your dad to come out of the back room, you pick something up and you read the back of it, right? Like, I am a very visceral person, right? I still buy records, I still buy CDs. So that part of it also speaks to me.
I totally get that. I think for me, my experience, like I said, the joy for me didn't come from going to Blockbuster. Yeah. The joy for me was knowing that I was going to get to hang out with my mom and my sister and watch movies.
Yeah.
And I think that joy still sparks in the modern age. I remember thinking to myself, like, we've been to the moon.
Yeah.
I still have to come here and rent this movie from you if I don't return. And the anxiety of like, and it would be on you. They talk about it in the documentary. I remember when I was old enough, it was like, my mom was like, I'm not paying your late fees. You're responsible for making sure this gets returned on time. If I couldn't drive, it wasn't like you need to go return it. It was like, that we're going to school, we're going to work, we're going wherever. You need to bring the movie so we can drop it off on the way or whatever the situation is.
Right.
And that just used to drive me crazy, you know? And I all the time, I go into Amazon and I hit the store button and I just peruse like member deals and you just find the most random titles and I'll watch it. I do the same on Netflix and stuff. Part of the reason why we do this podcast is because I am the guiltiest of burning hours just sifting through, reading descriptions, watching trailers to see, what I don't know. And I still get that same feeling.
Yeah, that's actually, you made two good points there is, the late fees thing. That's one of the major things that actually killed Blockbuster, more so than Netflix.
Yeah.
They really said like the cutting of of the late fees dropped them down to a third of the revenue. Not like cut it by a third, dropped them to a third of their revenue when they cut out the late fees. But your point about why we do this podcast, right? That is the one thing also that is interesting that's missing, right? Is a lot of these people, and I think this is why the Bend, Oregon store has this following, is you developed a relationship, right? For a lot of these people. I mean, I never did, but a lot of people who were there all the time, if you started to talk to people or you got experience, people recommending things to you, right? We don't necessarily have that anymore, right? If you become a regular at a record store or, a bar or something, they might be like, oh, you like this beer, here's something new. This might be up your alley. In the movie, in the documentary, they talk specifically about, if you're wearing a t-shirt of a band and somebody at the record store says, oh, hey, you like that band? Well, I got something else you might like. You know, a lot of people are nostalgic for that, you know, pointing you in the direction of another movie that you might not have heard. And so that's an experience that's lost, right? People don't get to talk about movies that much anymore. And we've sort of flipped the script on that, right? Like, people need to find us now and jive with our opinion and then tune in to what we're saying to find other movies, right? It's not that experience of going to the store, you know, seeing things next to each other in the same, you know, documentary section or the horror section, be like, oh, I'll try this, right? So that human interaction, I think, is something people are longing for too. And in the end, I think a lot of people are just confused, right? I don't think they necessarily miss Blockbuster. They miss all of it. They miss.
And there's new, better ways to do it, which is why Blockbuster just doesn't exist anymore. And I think, you know, we talked a little bit about how, for me anyway, it was the joy of watching movies. I can still watch movies, and I don't have to go anywhere or pay late fees or do whatever. You know, you talk about the community. I never had that at my Blockbuster. We'd go there probably every week or so, and no one knew who I was, and that was fine. You know, I would watch the movie and then go talk with my friends or do whatever, and that's what this podcast space gives us, right? I think it's so easy, you know, and I feel like when you're watching the documentary, what just didn't click for me was people like really like, you know, reminiscing hard and glorifying it. And the reality was it was a chore like anything else. Going to rent a movie was never, you know, a religious experience like they all make. The smell, the sound of the box, that was just normal life. You think about it now that way because you don't have that anymore. And it's cute for a day. I'll admit, when they open the box and it's, ooh, that sound, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that sound, right? I'll be over that in 10 seconds. Right. So this is, you know, for me, that is kind of lost on me because I just think we experience the same triggers in more efficient and better ways now. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. What is awesome about this documentary, you know, I'm not trying to suck the soul out of it. I think that part is fun, and it will, for a moment, right? It made me think. Like, I remember when I saw Clerks, and I was like, oh, dude, my dream would be to open up a movie rental place. I wanted to open my own movie rental place. I owned a bajillion movies. I was like, I'll just rent them out. I'll just watch movies all day, talk movies all day. Guess what? That's what I'm doing now without Blockbuster or owning a movie rental place. So,
a couple weeks ago, I tagged you on something on Facebook about this guy who turned his basement into like a movie rental store, right? Like his own version. All of his movies on display. It was like going into, you know, a mom and pop store. So
yeah, and you know, so there's, when you watch this, you're gonna feel that tug. I got over that quick, and what really kept me was the history of how movie rentals happen, how the studios really tried to kill all of this. What they don't talk about here, you know, so a lot of people didn't know the fact that when studios decided to sell videos for home viewing, they were $100. You had to you were essentially buying the license for the movie for the cost of $100. I remember one of the first times that came across my memory was 1989 Batman.
Yeah.
Not in 1989, but even still in like the early 90s, movies were crazy expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
And owning movies was not a thing. I remember, and then when we made the shift to DVD players, I bought a secondhand DVD player from a buddy of my uncle's for like $400. I mean, VCRs, DVD players, they cost over $1,000. And that was
music and CD players, right? I mean, there was a time when CDs were like $27 for, you know, a regular 12 to 15 song CD, right? And now you can buy them for $7.99 or $5.99, $4.99 in Barnes and Noble bin. Like that tech was super expensive, and that was absolutely fascinating to see how not only did that open the avenue for Blockbuster to start beating out the mom and pop stores, because the mom and pop stores could only afford 1 or 2 copies of things to rent it out, and then they got to protect themselves with the rewind fees and the late fees and things like that. But then that revenue sharing, right? Like that's just fascinating to me. That's what they got to throw a bone to the studio, right? The studio is trying to gouge you, and then you throw a bone to them, and they're like, here's 500 copies of Batman, right?
How movie theaters even exist today is beyond me, because the studio has their hand in everything. The cut for a mainstream movie at a movie theater is 90-10 over nut, right?
Yeah.
So after the cost of operating the theater, the studio gets 90% of ticket sales, which is why your popcorn costs $800, right? Because they bump up concessions 600% just to try to keep the lights on. They're only getting 10% of the tickets. Now, for the run of a movie, right, that it starts to slide. So, and you move closer and closer to 50-50. So in week 32 of Star Wars being out, it's a 50-50 split. But in those first couple weeks, it's 90-10. And it's the same with here. Blockbuster was brilliant in saying, if I want 100 copies, well, I need to give the studio a taste so that they'll give me a break on the price so that I can rent this 1,000 times and make that money back and kick up a bit to Papa. And, so out the gate, you're flirting with disaster. But, it is what made them what they were. And now it's their poor business practices made them what they are, which is obsolete. Yeah. So it's an awesome documentary.
Yeah.
It is it's going to make you feel every which way about movie rentals, the history of it, Blockbuster itself, and you're going to sit there and try to convince yourself that you miss it. It's okay that you don't. I don't miss it. But it's an absolute fun watch and a total blast. So definitely recommend The Last Blockbuster on Netflix. Again, that's the best part. And you can stream it there for free. Yep. No late fees. Okay, what else is going on? So huge news in the last week or two.
Yeah.
Which is that Netflix, again, has shelled out $469 million for the rights to Knives Out 2 and 3. Yep. Bringing back Rian Johnson as director and writer, bringing back Daniel Craig in the starring role of, what is his name? Benoit Blanc, I think?
Yep.
Benoit Blanc, something like that.
Yep.
And, and this is massive. It's a mainstream film franchise. Well, it's not a franchise yet, but the intention, the hope from Rian Johnson anyway, was he always wanted a sequel.
Yep.
But this is an insane amount of money to shell out for a movie that grossed $311 million in theaters in the height of movie-going experience before the pandemic hit back in 2019.
Yep.
To be fair, it grossed $311 million off a budget of $40 million. So it is a massive windfall, but are these sequels worth almost $500 million? I don't know.
I'm excited that we have a new IP, right? Like there's a new franchise, right? This is fresh. This is not Star Wars or Star Trek or Harry Potter, right? This is brand new territory. This is something that came out and people are like, hey, I want more of it, right? And it's a good movie. I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun. It's different. You know exactly how the mystery, the murder plays out from the beginning of the movie starts. And all of that is like working backwards, right? To as you kind of play along with the movie. And it's super fun, but none of the actors are returning except Daniel Craig.
So I think that might be its saving grace. Yeah. So a little bit of details on the deal. Yep. $469 million. Craig and Johnson and his production partner, whose name escapes me right now, are all set to walk away from this deal with over $100 million in pocket each.
Yeah.
That is the deal. Additionally, I mean, this is a massive deal. So Rian Johnson maintained full control of the IP. So it was Lionsgate and a producer named MRC, I believe, who produced the first Knives Out. The only thing they got was the right of first offer and the right of first refusal on any sequels.
Yeah.
What no one could see coming was the pandemic,
Right.
and they just couldn't. Lionsgate couldn't keep up when the pandemic hit, and they were just like, "We're going to start looking at streamers." Right of first refusal basically just says, "I've got an offer from Netflix for 469. You're allowed to match that, and I have to go with you if
Yeah.
you match the highest bid." Lionsgate couldn't do it. So Netflix grossly overpaid, but who knows when the theater experience is going to bounce back. And this is a huge win for Netflix that gets a proven entity
Yeah.
with a big name actor who can bring people to the streamer in a streaming world, because again, the pandemic, that is way more competitive than anyone would have ever imagined. And Disney Plus, and I mean, with all the Marvel properties and everything else popping out, HBO Max dropping main Warner Brothers titles on the same day as the theatrical release.
Yep.
Even Apple TV is really giving um, a lot of competition that Netflix wouldn't have necessarily expected otherwise.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
they really do need this. Is it worth it? I agree with you completely. I think now the saving grace for this, I don't think we need a sequel to Knives Out, and I don't want the same family back.
Right.
What made that movie interesting, the whole vomiting bit aside, I thought that was the stupidest thing ever. But that movie, in the first 20 minutes, which, by the way, it's available right now on Amazon Prime for now, before Netflix gets it. So in the first 20 minutes, they tell you exactly what happened.
Exactly. Yep.
And I'm sitting there like, what am I going to watch the next hour and 40? Like, how are they going to shock me?
100%.
And they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's brilliant. It's such a fun watch. It's totally worth it. This news breaks, and I think this movie skyrockets back up to the top of most people's lists because of it. But the sequels are going to be more of an anthology. The only carry through is this detective. It's kind of like an Agatha Christie.
Yeah.
It's like a Poirot. It's like that kind of stuff where this detective goes and works another amazing case.
Yeah.
All new characters, all new cast. It's the only way to even have a shot at being remotely successful, because the sequel game is tough, man. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting segue if you're good with that.
I am, sir. Knives Out on Amazon Prime. Go and check it out, and sit back and get ready for what's coming in Netflix.
Awesome. And otherwise, if we have time, I want to throw a curveball at you at the end if we have time. But that's segue is awesome. The sequel game is totally rough. And I'd be lying if it doesn't make me a little bit nervous for my favorite franchise. They dropped a little trailer yesterday, which is like the second trailer we've gotten. It was like, okay. But I'm particularly nervous because I watched Coming to America.
Yep.
You go into it with a bad track record, right? A bad track record. Anchorman 2, utterly forgettable. Nothing good about it. I saw it in theaters and I was like, eh. You get those years later sequels and they never really work. And the fact that Coming to America ends up on Amazon Prime should tell you everything you need to know. It couldn't get picked up anywhere else. Prime picks it up. And that's what it feels like. It feels like B Squad, right? Like it's an extended Super Bowl commercial. It was utterly boring and forgettable for a majority of it. Once you get over the shtick and some of the cameos, it's just boring. I thought the barbershop scenes were great. They felt like they didn't miss a beat. They looked exactly the same. But after that, I don't care. I just was bored. The story felt like it was going in certain places that it never really went to. And in the end, it was obvious, but it just felt B Squad. And It's just I'm not disappointed because I fully expected what I got, but I did hear people saying, "Oh, this is actually better than I thought it was going to be." So I was like, "Okay, I'm a little more intrigued." But no, it was just such a bummer.
Yeah. No, it was a train wreck. I had been trying not to watch it because why soil the memory?
Yeah,
When you said you had watched it and you were like, "Oh, I'm probably going to mention it." I mean, we try to both of us watch whatever we're going to talk about. And I put this off till the last possible second
yeah,
because I knew it was just going to be upsetting, and it didn't disappoint in that regard. Like, I think this one's a 48 and 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, critics to audience, respectively. Um, and that's generous. The plot is awful
yeah,
and it's rushed and there is only one scene in the entire movie that even made me laugh.
yeah,
And the barbershop scenes were fun to revisit those characters. They look the same. I think it's just because Arsenio Hall and Eddie Murphy are that old now. It's like the dude who plays Palpatine in Star Wars.
yeah,
It's the same actor.
yeah,
He's just 40 years older now,
yep,
and requires a lot less makeup.
yep,
So, but all that did was made me want to go watch the original again.
100%.
Uh, this movie, what it really feels like, it feels like it could have been a little better. I'm not saying it could have been good, but it could have been a little bit better if they had just had some more balls. It felt like they made a kids movie
Yeah,
out of what never should have been.
yeah,
At every level, right? Like the jokes were weaker, they
yep,
were softer, they weren't as edgy, they were careful. The movie was much more of a social justice message, which I'm not saying is necessarily a bad thing, but so much of it felt like fluff just for the sake of getting big name African American actors and singers involved in the project,
yeah,
and just forcibly pointing out the fact that it was African American actors, right? Like I am not, but I am a person of color. I appreciate it, but I think what Black Panther and movies like that did so well is that they placed actors in a place of power, right? We were watching African Americans be superheroes and kings and the most powerful people in the galaxy. No explanation needed.
yeah,
This is the norm.
yep,
Be this. They are this. We are equal, right? Like, and it gave you all of that in a story that was engaging and made sense. This just felt like a parade. It felt like a concert.
yeah. Like,
I watched like 4 concerts during this movie.
right. Like the first one became part of African American culture because of what it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because of who was in it, because of what it represented, because of it. This one felt like it was trying to say, I can also be that, right? By forcing that, by doing that parade. Like, let's throw Morgan Freeman in it. Okay, great. Let's do this,
Yeah, Salt and Pepper. Now Gladys Knight.
right,
Now this. Now and I was just like, where's the movie?
right.
Which, for movie's sake, it just pulled me out of any story that you were doing. It felt very distracting. It
Yeah,
was just like flashes of fireworks that you're watching a movie and then all of a sudden, bam. So bam, remember these people? Bam, remember this person? Bam. And you're just like, well, where does this go?
yeah,
And then when you get into the storyline, it felt forced and it felt weak, and it surprised you and took you on turns, but not in a good way because they didn't make sense.
yeah.
And what I was getting at was if you had the balls, it felt like they were making a movie where they didn't want any of the characters to not be likable,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everyone in the movie had to be likable,
Yeah,
and that didn't. There was a moment early on when Akeem goes back to New York, tracks down his son, and the mother sees him. It's like, ooh, and then they say, "Is this my dad?" And Leslie Jones has a face of like, "What? No, oh yeah, he's a kid. Yeah, that's your daddy." Like, I would have loved if he wasn't
Right.
And she
Yep.
was just like, opportunity knocks. And then that could have led to some really interesting, dramatic elements, conflict. You know, where do you go from there? What do you do for, well, maybe the kid still falls in love with the hairdresser and finds a home in Zamunda and whatever, right? Like, we could have really explored something complex and interesting in a way that the first movie really delivered. The
And
first movie was complex and it was engaging and interesting, and you felt the struggle of a young Akeem trying to find himself. I didn't feel anyone finding themselves. And then you bring it all home too with like our one bad guy. You know, the three daughters slap him around a little bit, and it's like, can we talk about this diplomatically? Next scene, everything's fine.
yeah. Yeah.
Right? We see no problem resolved. He gets slapped around, and that's it. That's the end of decades long like inter nation feuding
Yeah.
and bad blood is solved overnight, and then just haul out, you know, salt and pepper. Like, it was awful in every possible way.
It absolutely did not do the fish out of water even a tenth as well as the original, right? Like, I never really cared about life in Zamunda, right? That wasn't what I get it. He's a prince. He lives a princely life. He's charmed. He goes to America with all of his belongings, and they get robbed, and suddenly, you know, people are selling his, you know, gold gold hairdressers from underneath their coats. You know,
Well, and it's like the first movie never happened. He's no different.
Yeah.
He and his wife, Lisa,
Yeah.
who is from Queens, from New York, from whatever, like, she brings no influence with her,
Right.
and instead totally assimilates into this posh, luxurious lifestyle to the point where when another American comes in, she is as bad. I mean, honestly, in the original, the mother was much more
Yeah.
understanding and progressive and interesting.
Yep.
Whereas Lisa in this one and Akeem, it's like they totally forget where they come from and the journey they had to go on to find their love. That's just totally thrown out the window for the sake of force feeding a narrative in this new character that it doesn't make sense. The reason why you had to do that is because your story is not there. I was shocked. Watching it, I was shocked that after 20 years, 20 odd years, this is the script that Eddie Murphy reads and says, oh yeah, this is what we got to make. Like, I can't believe that's true.
So that's a great point, and I was really thinking about this early today, right? This is the double-edged sword of all of these streaming platforms, right? You know, it's, you used to have the studios that you shop around to, and if none of the studios wanted it, it doesn't get picked up. But now,
Yeah.
studios want it. Now you can go to Amazon, you can go to Netflix, you can go to Apple TV, you can go to HBO Max, you can go to Disney Plus. You've doubled or tripled the studios that you can take these things to, and it's almost a guarantee now that somebody's going to pick this up, because what does it hurt? You know,
well, but it's also a guarantee. I mean, we watched it.
Yeah,
right. You've
right.
got the entire cast returning. It's a classic. It's a proven IP. It's a guaranteed audience, and that is why. But you have to, like, but why do we keep allowing this? Why do we keep entertaining this?
Yep.
Let's, like, let movies be great, and let's make new great movies. I'm not saying there can't be reboots. I'm not saying there can't be remakes, but decades later sequels are never good. I challenge anyone watching or listening to send me one example of a decades later sequel that is good.
Yeah. Yep.
There's been solid remakes. There's been some decent reboots, watchable stuff, but not sequels.
That's, like I said, that's why I get nervous. And then to drop this little trailer for Ghostbusters Afterlife, it's the second trailer we've gotten. The first trailer looked solid, the one that came out almost 2 years ago, and I was like, okay. And then they dropped this thing yesterday, and I was like,
it might be a marketing thing. Don't worry too much. But also, Ghostbusters Afterlife, I would argue and posit to you that it is much more of a reboot than it is a decades later sequel.
It could very well end up being that way, yes.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how that is handled. We'll see. The last thing I really want to throw out there real quick, just because I think people are going insane, is we talked about Bridgerton, right? Coming out of
Bridgerton, yeah.
our a little maternity paternity holiday break. People are losing their minds that Regé-Jean Page is not gonna be in season 2, and the stuff that I'm seeing on Twitter, on Facebook, people are mad. And
it's the same that happened with Downton Abbey.
Yeah, but you have that small voice of people who are saying, like, hey, this is based on an existing IP. He's not in the subsequent books. And people, I'm not watching it. They like, Shonda Rhimes needs to get on that and get him back in. And he himself is like, I was signed for 1 season. I didn't leave. I'm not in the rest of the show. And like the Snyder Cut thing, I feel like we've opened floodgates for people to think that their opinions matter and that they're going to and they're not going to pay attention.
Says one half of a pair of opinions.
Like, there's just, this is based on something. Like, it's
yeah.
I'm sorry y'all liked this guy, but that's what it was. And I don't know. I'm very frustrated with that people can't seem to look past that or do a little cursory research and realize that this is a thing that's going somewhere and could potentially be 8 completely different series, right? Talking about Knives Out, that's going to have to evolve. This could be 8 different seasons of things because it follows 8 different characters.
So what's interesting, I agree with you completely. And we are going to, so it was recommended on the last episode, on the last live show rather, that we do Snyder Cut.
Yep.
So we're 100% forcing Tim to watch not only the Snyder Cut, but the original Joss Whedon cut.
Right.
And we're going to do that on our episode on the 22nd.
Yeah.
So right before we're back to the normal podcast schedule. But yeah, that whole movement has, giving in to that movement, I should say, has really, really emboldened the masses, right? There's been years, right, in recent history before, I guess the Snyder Cut chants were happening before this, but people want season 8 of Game of Thrones to be fully remade and redone. Right. People want just original cuts of all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just, when you give in to one, the voices will only get louder and it'll only be harder to keep saying no. I think, when it comes to this is a little bit different. It does remind me a lot more of Downton Abbey when they killed off, what's his name? The guy who plays Matthew from The Guest, Dan Stevens.
Yeah.
They killed off Dan Stevens at the end of season 3, but that show was only ever contracted for 3 years.
Right.
And he wanted to go do other things. Regé-Jean may not want to continue doing Bridgerton. Right. Now, no one could have anticipated the massive success of the first season. Right. There are whispers and talks. When your name starts getting added to a very short list of people huffing and puffing for you to be the next James Bond, to be the next... Do you want to be tied down to Netflix's Bridgerton? Nope. Dan Stevens didn't want to be tied down. He wanted to go off and do other things. So, I think people just need to get over themselves. We need to become a culture that is okay with moving on and letting the next person come and wow us. Right? I think what is going to be difficult is that Daphne, is that her name? Daphne?
Yep.
She is going to be in the subsequent seasons.
Right.
And I'm not sure if she is in the books or not. But all the Bridgertons will continue to, kind of chime in and show up. So if we're going to see her and we're going to see the baby, are we going to have to be constantly making excuses? I didn't think he was going to be in the next seasons, but I thought he might for sure make a cameo or a quick pop-in in an episode or two, just to be like, I'm still here. And that doesn't take much, a day of shooting and back to your normal life.
Yep.
So to find out that even that's not going to be the case was a little bit interesting.
Yep.
If they're planning on having her come back too.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I can understand that, but at the same time, man, let him go. let him do new things. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. You and I, our opinions don't matter. I put this out into the world for like-minded people and people who don't think like us to engage in a conversation and dialogue, not to force anyone to do anything, because get over yourselves. Like, again, it's not that they don't want him. That character doesn't exist in book 2. They're trying to stay true to the IP, and he may not want to come back. So, it's, I don't know. It's always interesting. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be a thing. And, we've seen it before. It won't be the last time.
Yep.
It is what it is.
Yep.
I don't know. Are you going to watch? I mean, dude, Bridgerton sucked us in.
Yeah, I mean.
But I can't imagine another character or pair being as engaged. They really blew the wad on season 1, because I think that Daphne and Hastings are, of who we were introduced to, are the 2 best characters.
Yeah, I mean, I really didn't get that much of a feeling for anybody else. I mean, there's some interesting things there.
There's a lot of characters I don't want to see.
Right. The intrigue, I guess, is there with, like, ooh, Lady Whistledown. Like, we know who she is, but nobody else does. I found that character and the actress that portrayed her completely off-putting in the way that she played that character. I was just really annoyed by her, just everything about that character. And
I hated that it was her. Like, so I already don't really care about season 2.
I really, her name was Penelope, I think, right? And they called her Pen a lot, and I developed, my nickname for her was Pigpen, because she just had this, like, she was very pink, and, like,
she was very pink.
I just didn't like her. I found her so annoying. I hated every time she was on screen. So yeah, I think I feel exactly the way you do. They blew their wad on that and set themselves up for something that I fully doubt we get to 8 seasons. I absolutely doubt we get to 8 seasons.
Are you kidding me? It's Shondaland. There's 1,000 seasons of Grey's Anatomy. They've killed everyone on that show, still making shows.
Just brought all those dead people back in this season. They've all been back in episodes.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man. I hate Grey's Anatomy. I'll watch the Ghost season. That would be the best. If it's like Haunting of Bly Manor meets Grey's and like Haunting of Sacred Heart. No, not Sacred Heart. That's Scrubs. What is it?
Gray Sloan Memorial.
Gray Sloan Memorial?
Huh?
Is the hospital named for her?
Her sister that died.
Stupid. I hate that show even more now. But yeah, if it's the Haunting of Gray Sloan Memorial, that I might watch that.
It's more like Meredith is in a coma this entire season, and
like Jacob's Ladder.
Each episode, one of the dead characters comes back, and she has a conversation with them about whether she should cross over or not.
Wait, is she really? Please don't. Can we stop talking about it? It's actually making me angry now.
Well, we only got 1 minute left anyway, so I think you should do the spiel and close this out.
Dude, all right, so next week, wouldn't it be great, though, if the whole time she was dead? It's like Lost / Jacob's Ladder. She's just been dying the whole time, and none of this happened.
Inside a snow globe in the mind of an autistic.
Okay, the spiel. Next week's Thursday, 7:30 live show, we're going to be talking about the Kevin Costner, Diane Lane movie, Let Him Go. You must rent it to watch it. It's not available anywhere, but check it out and join us for that conversation next week. The week after that is our final live show for now, and we're going to be doing, as I said, the Snyder Cut of Justice League. Yep. In the meantime, you can check us out at the website, pausereviews.com. Obviously here on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Listen to the past episodes of the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, on the Podbean app or everywhere else. Links on the website. Go there, check it out. Thank you guys for dealing with the live show stuff and for checking us out here. It's been a huge weight off to allow us to move and get set up and all that jazz, while we can still put out some kind of content. I promise once it's all over, we'll be back to posting more regularly.
Yep.
But and going back to our normal shows, starting with Tombstone on the 29th.
Yeah.
Lots and lots and lots to look forward to. Keep sticking with us. We promise to let the dust settle and really get into a groove this year. But as always, thank you guys so much for checking us out. And we will catch you next week, 7:30, right here, talking about Let Him Go. Tim, a pleasure as always, my friend.
Always. I love it. Love it.
Yeah, buddy. All right, guys. Until next week, I'm your boy Frank.
Tim.
See ya.